Hello, my name is Charles Russell. I'm doing a series of videos on JavaScript. And what you see here is me open up my Firefox browser to the ECMA homepage. And this is just to provide a neutral place to do some of the things that I'm going to be talking about now. So as I said, I'm in Firefox, and we're going to be using a tool called Firebug. It's not the only option for Firefox. It actually has a pretty good web console built in, but I really like Firebug, and I've actually got another tool in here called autocomplete that I find kind of useful as well. So let's go on and open up Firebug, and I'm going to do a really quick introduction. As far as JavaScript goes, there's probably two things that you're predominantly interested in. One is this console where I'm at now, and the other is this script. And this lets you, the difference is that in the script page, I can actually take a look at all my JavaScript files that I have on my web page or loading in from a separate file on my web page, and I can actually go in and set breakers, step through my code line by line, do all kinds of cool stuff. What the console lets me do is do JavaScript in real time. It's also a place that I can write errors and messages to. So if I have something, I can write information to the console to log it so I can see it later. Now the console has two modes in Firebug. One is like what you see now, where I type my commands down here at the bottom, and then it's going to appear up in this area in here. My results are going to come up in here. I can also, if I want to, do a multiline mode, where I can type in all of my lines of JavaScript I want to execute, and then run it right here. Enough said on that. We'll talk more about Firebug because we're going to be using this throughout the course. But we'll do that later. So let's talk about the very first thing we were going to discuss here, and that's the type of operator. Now, the previous two videos, I was discussing data types, and this whole video is going to be focused on just that. So let's start with just getting the type of, say, something random. I'm just going to do type of random letters. As you can see, it's undefined. Now I'm going to actually do this because I don't want random. I want to have something I can remember. So I'm going to actually do, well, let's prove myself. Let's just do type of, and let's just do a variable I'm going to use called test. So we want to know the type of test. Again, test is undefined. Now, one of the things I talked about in the beginning of the data types videos, the two data type videos, and also the end of the variable videos, is how JavaScript is a weakly typed language. And it's going to take on the type of whatever is assigned to it. Let's just look at that. So let's take that TST, and let's just give it a value of 5. This is called a literal. So I'm actually putting in literally the number 5 into that. So now you can see that it has the value test. So if I do type of, just as a proof, you'll see that now it has taken on a number. If I was to do the same thing, test equal some string. Now I look at the type of test. You'll see that we get a string. Now this is pretty much the behavior you'd expect, but I also mentioned that the ECMA specification requires something weird happen. So I'm going to empty this test value by setting it to null. Now remember that I said when you set something to null, it's the same as just setting it empty. It doesn't have a value, but it's still declared. It still exists. So what is now the type of TST now that we've set this to the primitive type null? Object, just as I discussed, and for the reasons I discussed. So you can't use the type of variable reliably if you're trying to find a null value. All right. Now that we've gone through all of these things and we've discussed this, let's get a little bit into the actual other primitive data types. Now, do you remember I said that these data types have methods and properties? Well, let's take a look here. Let's start with number. And as you can see, these are these capital letters here, this nan and these things here. These are properties of it. I'll talk about those for just a minute. But I didn't mention them in the slideshow because this is not something you'll use very often. So I just want to do it. But I'm going to show you here just for completeness. Now, I also only talked about for number, to integer, to float, because those things are pretty much valid no matter what the browsers. Some things are kind of browser specific, so I try to say those things that are pretty safe that will work on, are supposed to work on anything. So I also said that string has a whole lot of properties associated. So let's just type in string and just look at, isn't it amazing how much better things work when you spell them correctly? All right, so here's string, and as you can see, they have a whole lot of methods to manipulate strings. So manipulating strings is a pretty easy thing to do with JavaScript. That prototype property you see that it came up automatically is really cool, but we're not going to deal with it here. Now, the same goes for a Boolean. Again, the toSource and toString that I talked about. By the way, the toString exists on everything. It just converts whatever something is to a string. I may do something with that in just a minute. Okay. So let's start with the Boolean setting of Boolean primitive. So tst equals true. Remember that a primitive type of Boolean can only take two values. That's true or false. Notice there's no quotes around it. It's just true, the actual value true. So now when I push enter and I go back to look at type of, I get a Boolean as expected. So let's say I do want a string. So let's just type in x equals st dot toString Now if I look at the type of x, it's a type string. Now we also talked about how a lot of these things have wrapper object. That was a perfect example of what I was talking about. How a variable will get converted to its primitive type, an operation performed on it, and then set back to its primitive. So let's experiment with this a little bit by making a Boolean type. So we already know that tst. We'll just go back in and prove it. Prove it still, type of tst is still Boolean. But let's use the wrapper object, Boolean, and see what happens. So let's do tst equals new, which is invokes a constructor on a Boolean. And we'll just pass it in one of those falsy values I was talking about. Remember that I said that truthy and falsy, if I type in something like an empty string or a 0 or something that has a nan value, it's going to be false. So let's just pass in null. So by passing a null, it's actually what I said. There is no variable there, but it's going to say, okay, null, I know what null is. So when I'm going to make a variable and I'm going to a new Boolean object, and its value of property is going to be set to false. So let's look at the type first of all of test. And you see we now have a type object. If I do type of you see that we've got back our primitive data type. So you have this value of property that contains the primitive value. Let's see, what else should I show you about that? I think that's enough for now. I think you've got the idea of kind of how data types all work and how the type of variable works. Oh yes, let's take a look. Remember I said that numbers you can't do much with numbers? Let's take a look at that math object. Remember that they said that in JavaScript that math has its own object and it's universally declared. It's always available. Well, this is what the math object has as methods. A lot of stuff. So when you work with numbers, you need to do calculations. This is actually a really good stuff. There's actually even some useful things in here, like for instance, you want to use, you're going to do some logarithmic stuff, so you want to use the e. Well, watch this. If I just type e and hit enter, there it is, the stuff for logarithms. If I want to use pi, I can do that. Out to enough digits at least to be dangerous. Anyway, I think that's enough for now. You've got the ideas. We'll discuss next time operators. Hope you're enjoying this series. I'll try to get a little more practical stuff in here, but it's going to be back to slides next time because again we're going to get a little deep. We're getting deep in the weeds now. So thanks a lot for listening. Till next time.